Let's start from creating a plane geometry. Going to render settings, basic settings, changing output to something like square, lock the ratio, change camera focal length to portrait and oriented so we see properly our geometry, and B to display the wireframe and increase the segment density. All this we need for better simulation fidelity. The next step is to go and add cloth tag. If we hit play, everything going down, so we need to pin the zones. Maybe decrease the segments for fast preview, going outside the camera. I don't want to convert a polygon object, so for parametric plane we can use a vertex map tag for pinning. Shift C, typing vertex map, and inside of this vertex map we're using fields and create, for example, a rectangle oriented with the perspective of our mesh, dropping rectangle directly there. Let's rename it to border pins. After we've done it, go to vertex tab, select our curve and change to radius, distance mode. Now we can play with radius to set the pinning map, but nothing is happening right now because we need to first of all go to our cloth tag and mix animation, enable with pins and drop our vertex map there. Hitting play, and now we see that sides are falling down but the center is stuck. We need to reverse our vertex map. Open remapping folder and we have here invert mark. Hitting play, and now borders are pinned and center is affected by gravity. Go into surface settings, increasing the stretchiness, increase the timeline, and maybe we will play with another parameter to extend this deformation, like target length. And now we see folds, and that's great and adding a lot of realistic deformation to our simulation. In map section we can drop our vertex map to pin the borders so they will not be stretched. Everything goes good. Go into mix animation and maybe smooth the transition zone by decreasing the influence value. Maybe something low, we're losing pinning, so we need to find an average value in between of 20 and 50 to have a balance. Maybe 45. Looks very good and smooth. Keep it. Also we need some forces, for example a wind force, that will be affecting our cloth engine object. Putting up, going to our tag, and we don't need to bring any forces there, only for exclude. I put wind at the bottom, going to its settings, increase wind speed. We need to find a value that will bring all our simulation up. 2000 seems to be okay. I think it's connected to the gravity, that is -900, and we can play with turbulence to have this additional dynamic. Simulation is always a bit tricky because we need to find the proper value for our scale, for our geometry, and finding this balance. 100 is not enough, 1100 seems to be okay, not very fast going up, a little bit turbulence, going Ctrl-D to simulation, and we have gravity, -981. So wind force should have a bigger value. Let's add additional elements, a sphere, with hexagon type, decreasing radius, going to adding cloth tag and check how they interact. Our spheres goes up, so we're going into the tag, into the forces, and put a wind force to exclude list. I'm going to create a lot of these spheres, but before go into tag, into surface, and decrease its mass, so it would be lighter than the cloth. After this adjustment, we see that spheres didn't affect much to our cloth. If we increase the mass or maybe lower it, they will be pushed by the main plane. I decrease the radius. Yes, sphere start to squish, but we will adjust it further. Let's create a cloner, duplicate few spheres in it. Few spheres I'm adding just maybe for further tweaking of material, so not to mess with multi-shader thing. Decreasing the radius, going to add random effector, going to parameters, maybe add a little bit variation into position, in scale, maybe 0.5, and angle rotation in all axes. Open top view, adjust the size of a cloner to smaller one, increase the quantity. I hope this will cover our cloth perfectly. Maybe something in y-axis. Seems to be okay, they will fall down. And one more thing, I need to create a small push apart effector to manage no intersection. I copy the value of 3 to our push apart effector and increase, so it will push everything apart from each other. So we should be 100% sure that there is no any geometry penetration. I'm setting size 25 in all axes for cloner, go into first frame, launch animation, and we don't see any spheres falling down. We need to transfer our tag from sphere directly to cloner. Going to first frame and delete all other inner tags. Everything start to work. We have a lot of squished spheres, it's okay, no problem. Decreasing the segments, a lot of squishing. We need to solve this. Going to cloth tag, and let's start from adding inner pressure. Enable balloon, or we can enable soft body. Sometimes the first option works well, sometimes the other. I think soft body doing great job. Maybe we decrease the softness because we don't need any deformation of our spheres. Increase the radius a bit. Checking, they falling and staying and keeping their shape. But we see how they combine together and push our cloth to the bottom. So let's up the mass for our cloth. 2. Looks okay. No any influence from the spheres. Here we have some group. Maybe going to settings and decrease mass a little bit more, because the less mass our spheres have, the less they will influence and keep weight pushing to our plate. Cloth mass is upped to 4. Also we need a borders for our side, not to lose all our spheres. Convert cube to polygonal mesh and delete the top polygon, adding a collider tag to it, and we need to hide it from a render. To simplify viewport display, I will add a proper display tag and pick the lines with wireframe style. Launching the animation to see how our collider works. Looking good, spheres goes from our cloth, but they passing through our collider. We need to go to collider tag and be sure that collider side is set properly. Now it's set to front, but we need a back because the normals are inverted and spheres are collided with inner side of our cube. Now everything works and we don't lose any of our spheres. Basic setup is working. Now we need to adjust for final render, increase with the height segments, checking the speed and how it interacts. We have different scale of folds, but it seems that our settings works perfectly with this mesh density also. Let's go back for faster preview. One more detail I want to add is animated mask that will drive waves from side to side. We can create it with shader field and noise shader. Let's enable frame refresh, disable a contour, let's adjust the noise. Increase the contrast, increase the scale, disable Y and Z scale parameters and set speed to 1. Now we immediately have these moving to the side waves that we were planning. I forgot to uncheck use deform points and everything works very well. Use deform points has a strange description in help, so check by your own, just believe me, without this mark everything works better. Now we need to combine both maps with each other. I try subtract, going here, looks okay. Use deform points, a little bit different results. Spheres are playing, but I think I will uncheck use deform points and keep everything as it was. Going inside noise and play with brightness and contrast to have more solid lines and zones between each other. Playing with scale and contrast to have thin red lines in between of our active zones. Finding the value of contrast to have beautiful waves and zones that are driven by wind. The red zones are very sticky and I would like to play maybe with brightness, not to generate pure red zones, especially in our noise. Go into tag, disable for faster preview, checking how it looks, going inside our shader, finding and tuning, maybe scaling, yeah, thin lines, maybe not so rare, I think it's too much, playing with seed and finding the value that will suit our proportion and scale. Enabling close surface and checking how our vertex map works. By enabling close tag back, we get waves that are driven by wind and pin maps that going from right to left and adjust these ballooning zones. I duplicate our corner pin and rename it to inner pins. I would like to add one more pin map, going and put our inner mask at the top and shrink down in height and put it directly into our shader field with radius mode also. We need to remap our mask, we need to invert our mask and set the blending mode to min to match the base shape. Turning shader field on and we have sailing that are blowing up and spheres are interacting with the cloth. The great thing in using noise that we have a variety in strength of pinning map. Somewhere a very strict stacking and somewhere we have a less stacking effect. Going to camera and checking, enabling balloon for our spheres so they will keep their shape with inner pressure as a helper. But as we see, it doesn't work well. Going to surface, disabling bendness, going to soft body, disabling softness, and one more thing is going to simulation settings and increase sub steps and iteration, smooth iteration and a little bit dampen. increasing this parameter will bring a more stiffness into simulation of our geometry. Also, I increase a little bit collision passes, just maybe to 5, and going to increase the segment count, and I think we need to cache this thing. I select both text and in cache section hit calculate cache. Everything is cached and we can play the animation. Looks very interesting and dynamic. It is bad that we can't slow down the cache like bullet simulation, so we need to go to settings of our cloth, upping the dynamic, and maybe in shader field decrease the speed of our changing noise. Selecting both text, clear cache, calculate cache. Waiting for saving, it seems to be a huge file, and hitting play. And now everything looks more smooth, and I really like the slowdown in simulation. I keep this variant as a final, and let's start to set up render and shading. Launch the IPR. I have a reboot of cinema. I've created a basic silver shader with old material, create one more and set the color to white and increase the roughness into reflection section. And to smooth the shape of our spheres, I will add erase object, and in geometry section enable geometry override, tessellation, and decrease maximum subdivision to something like 2. The same value I will set in minimum edge length. We need to subdivide and smooth the cloth, geometry override, tessellation, 1 in edge and maybe 2 in maximum subdivision, or even 1. We have a really smooth folds without need of increasing the base geometry segmentation. Move the white shader directly to cloner and create one more shader for a plane. Selecting erase shader, pick something vibrant color, maybe like purple, and increasing the roughness to a high value. Going to shader graph and create a new material, pick the silver preset, and I blend them, increasing the roughness a bit for silver, and blend them between each other with material layer. Erase material as a base and the silver material as a layer color. Now we need to build a mask, for example max and noise, drop it to our shader graph, and I would like to create a kind of flakes effect. Max and noise, connect to layer mask, we see this smooth blending, so I solo the max and noise, connected it to output, and in settings increase the contrast to maximum and decrease brightness to get these spots of silver, decreasing overall scale to something like 0.1, decreasing the brightness to have these spots of silver. Final tweaks of max and noise scale, maybe 0.5, and we have beautiful flakes like effect. Creating area light and rotate it directly to the bottom. But before, I want to create few groups. The first one is cloth, and to put all related object there, maybe wind, splines and plane, and one more group called spheres to put push apart, random and cloner there. So our project will be more understandable. Cube will drop to the bottom and rename to Cube Collider. Let's adjust the position of our area light, move it to the top and decrease the intensity because it's too bright now. Maybe 10. This silver part looks great. 5, maybe 3, and move it to the side to have a beautiful shades fighting the position. I do like how we create light and shade transition, checking different frames, waiting for auto saving. So it seems it's a huge cache, but we can't check it. So in cache we have no information about file size. Creating one more light and position it to the side, a bit up. We need to rename it, one for top, the other side, lowering the intensity, something like 10. Duplicate by moving with holding control, rotate, upscale it to a huge value. We have this beautiful specular on the edge. Now it's time to tune intensity for both side area lights, maybe 15 for one, and the another is set to some high, 20 and 6. The top moving a bit lower, and create one more area light, but like sphere, decrease it and put directly to our close and more closely to have this additional specular just in the middle of our scene. Playing with roughness into material, we need to find the balance, maybe decreasing a bit saturation or checking the high one. The less roughness, the more glossy it is. I think it's not the way the cloth should look, so up the roughness. I want to change the regular color to some gradient. I create a max and noise, pick the color, I copy it to buffer, and instead of playing with max and noise, I create RS ramp, connect it to input, and in base color, so we have black and white gradation of color, and instead of our markers, I delete them, paste our purple one. It should be the dark one, and the right would be a bright one. Connect RS ramp direct to output and play with scale, maybe contrast, to have a little bit difference into the diffuse albedo shader, adjusting the difference in color and check how it looks in RS material directly. I dislike the result, so adjust the ramp while material layer is connected. Go into standard material, and in sheen parameter I will up its weight and change the color to bring some velvet feel into our fabric. Adjusting the weight and saturation looks nice. I'm pretty happy with the result, but I think we can tweak a little bit lighting. So RS area light creates too much specular. Let's rename it to sphere. Maybe decrease the intensity to have a smoother lighting. I think much better. Maybe a little bit more. 6 seems to be okay. Auto saving. Going back to material, I think final tweaks. Let's expand and arrange our nodes like this, so everything should be understandable and readable. Create one more max and noise, bump map adapter, connect one to another, texture input, and this bump map will connect to RS standard material. In bump map height scale, let's set a high value just to obtain the result. Solo max and noise by connected to output. I have a shortcut C for this. Decreasing the scale to something very low, maybe like this, just to have a little bit touch of roughness. That's great. Now we can decrease the height scale too much, a little bit less, and now we have this fabric feeling and can mix back our shaders. In camera I will create a focus distance point. In tag I'm using the old system, going to bokeh and increase the power to a high value, but maybe not too much high like this one, but something like 2, a little bit touch of depth of field. Going to settings of post effects, going to photometric exposure, enable, and it blown up and washing our scene. Disabling allow desaturation because we need a vibrant color, and playing with allow overexposure slider. Maybe I set it to something like 0.3. Black crush threshold and black crush amount can help us to resolve and bring our shades back to the image, not to have a blown out. Without post effects, with post effects. Adjusting threshold, maybe no so much aggressive. Saturation will, I'm sorry for this, saturation can up and add a little bit vibrance, and film ISO can help to control the exposure after everything is set in light. Finding something like maybe 70 or 80, a little bit more in overexposure, and bokeh creates a great blur. Maybe decrease it to a lower value. Waiting for iPad to calculate, pretty good. Going and maybe checking the bloom effect. Let's up the intensity to see where it's applied on our spheres, great one, and bloom threshold will be set to generate glow directly on our spheres, decreasing bloom intensity, just a subtle effect. Enabling bucket rendering, and I think we can have a little bit optimizing methods for this particular scene. We need our render to be finished with default settings and get the time of this render to compare our further optimization to see the efficiency. Yeah, we have the time, going to Redshift, bucket quality, enabling hardware ray tracing, checking how it improves our render time. Buckets, I think, going a bit faster. Yeah, a little bit improvement. Threshold I will set to 0.15 and decrease global illumination, reflection and refraction rays in our scene. Because it's open scene, we don't have a lot of bouncing and reflecting from each other. I think this will help. Refraction can be set to 0 because we don't even have this type of materials here. Combine depth, maybe something like 4. Okay. We need maybe 3, should be very aggressive. Let's check. Waiting for initializing optics, rendering, and we have 9 seconds. Great speed up. Keep this thing on, go into system and up the size of a bucket. One more checking. And the result, the last bucket, is a bit higher. So it depends on the resolution. If we up the overall scale of our image, bucket with a higher size should be more effective. I use tokens in save, going to output all frames. We have a higher resolution, 960, and it's ready to go. We covered a lot of aspects from simulation to shading, lighting, and even a render optimization. Hope this knowledge will help you in your everyday work. Some maybe optimization tricks, some working with vertex maps tricks. Now you see the result of our simulation, and I think It's a very good technical and imaginary result for this tutorial. Thank you for your attention. See you next time.